evening, everyone. Welcome to the Board of Selectmen's meeting for February 7th, 2019. Camille, how are you this evening?
Very good, thank you.
Very good. Everybody get back safe and sound from Atlanta?
You should have.
Hats. Ties with an appropriate roll something on.
You should have.
Think about that.
Well, it's good to be good to have everyone back. The first item of business this evening, actually, we'll address citizens' comments. If there are any citizens' comments. First citizen.
You have a comment?
I have a-
Do it. Okay.
You have a comment. As a citizen, absolutely. you have a comment.
Okay.
So we'll move right to the second item.
Coffee, right?
Reviewing a review of the 2019 annual town meeting warrant articles. Carl, would you like to address the sequence of articles?
So let me point out a couple of things. When I drafted the order, I didn't put them in any particular sequence, with the exception of where free cash appears, because that has to have a logical place after the budget, and then if you're going to use free cash to reduce the tax rate, that has to be towards, after you've done all the other financial articles. So there's not any particular order here, and I know typically you work with the moderator on coming up with the order. One question I would have for the board and the moderator is whether the order of the articles can be determined not in the warrant, but before town meeting. So working together with the moderator, once you know what are they going to be the substantive articles, then being able to indicate to town meeting people who come to town meeting, here's the order we'll take up things. Because I think, as you pointed out to me, there's a number of things here which will probably be dismissed, but you don't know that yet.
Right, so working backwards, so typically the Warren Committee prepares the Blue Book, and that provides their responses to each of the warrant articles. So what we like to do is, prior to the Blue Book going out, which is usually the middle of April, around April 15th, so somewhere around April 1st, we like to try and have the articles in order so that when the Blue Book goes to the homes of citizens, it's in some order.
Mm-hmm.
I will tell you that I think 2 years ago, towards the end, we decided that we would be better off moving some of the warrant articles around. And so so the Blue Book went out with a specific order, and we then had an insert that changed the order of the warrants for town meeting. But that was an extenuating circumstance, I think. So really what we need to do is, after the open hearing, you tend to have a good idea of what articles are going to need more debate on the floor of town meeting. And so typically after the open hearing is probably a good time for us to begin to strategize with the moderator and the warrant committee, the order of the articles. I like what you did here, because we have the financial driven articles and then those that don't require any financings. And we've never really done it this way. It seems really logical to do it this way. I don't know why we never thought of doing it this way before.
I agree. I agree with this. And typically, Carl, Jim has come to Warren, as Robin just laid out. Once the Blue Book, and at open meeting, we tried to determine the two hot topics, time and money, which are going to require the most of people's attention, which are going to require the most debate, which would require, in terms of citizens' input at town meeting. So we try to put those in order and get those in front. As we've discussed and we've talked numerous times with regards to our free cash initiative, to segment that just as you described, to get that to the front of the order, closer to the front of the order, specifically for those reasons, because we would encourage debate, we would encourage participation for the topics that we're considering free cash for, rather than waiting until the end of the night. As Kate Candy described in our last meeting, 2 meetings ago, that stopgap placeholder for free cash to backfill has to occur at the end of the line. You have to have that, because you need that to be able to balance anything, whether money is appropriated or not appropriated at the end of the night. So I do think this is a great idea. And as Mr. Spring has talked about for the past couple of months, we've been looking at different ways to make town meeting more efficient and encourage participation. I think this will do well.
So that's a nice segue.
You're welcome.
So there are a couple of warrants a couple of items that we've been talking about for quite a while. But I'm not really sure how broadly the topics that we've been talking about for quite a while have been sort of publicized. And when we come to, the question I was going to ask, and there's several ideas that have been discussed at length at warrant committee around free cash. And there have been suggestions of creating stabilization funds and with specific objectives.
How do we plan to sort of broadly make those considerations public? I mean, the only, I think it would be not a great use of town meeting time to sort of just open up and sort of open up the floor to debate or discussion about those items, because they're not as straightforward as might be, you might suspect. So will we be doing any sort of outreach to the community to sort of prime the pump on something like that? Likewise, I know we have something we've been discussing. I mean, certainly, Carol, there's going to be a warrant to try to reallocate some of the money that was appropriated last time. I know the rail trail that may or may not be.
Right.
And there's one more somewhere. And then there's an idea that we set aside some money on a contingency around the boilers.
Mm-hmm.
We all know that they're old. We all know that they've been serving the town well. And that if we run into a problem, if the backstop is to, I think, rent temporary boilers at a cost of about $7,000 a month. And if we get into a sustained period, because at this point we don't know what the Carroll Community Center Project Committee is going to, how their information is going to be received, having a contingency fund to help us ensure continued use of the building makes a great deal of sense. So, but the question is really, getting the message out so that people have an opportunity to think about these things, so that when we come to town meeting, there's more likely to have a view and express an opinion than try to go back and rediscuss all the groundwork that you literally spend 4, 6, 8, 10 hours in committee with law committee formulating. So it's just, is there a plan?
So, just thinking out loud, I think, we had talked briefly last meeting about the importance of putting together especially for free cash, a framework. So I think perhaps we should put together for each of the warrant articles that warrant, excuse the pun, discussion, a document that maybe says what it is we're looking for, why it's important, and some of the, clear and concise points of what we think is the right direction to move. And we had talked earlier on about having a selectmen open house. So if we had these documents, we could then begin maybe even in 3 or 4 weeks. We talked about maybe one Saturday posting a meeting and going to the transfer station and just beginning to socialize some of the items that are going to be discussed at town meeting. You know, one of the other things we could do is maybe one of us go to C of A and talk to them about, right. But in order to do this and be effective, like, you know, what I think we need and what I envision is an 8 by 11 piece of paper that's maybe two-sided, that's very concise, and just spells out why the warrant article and what we're trying to do.
Yeah, just getting the information.
Right, and post that also on the website, you know, so you could have maybe a town meeting section and say, because I can't even begin to tell you how many times people say to me, well, what are you asking for at town meeting? So clearly we understand what it is, but
It's the same, we had the same conversation last night at Warren, where everybody, we had school department, Don, and we had a conversation with regards to the particular item of free cash and reducing the unfunded liability in OPEB, which is currently, OPEB has a $24 million unfunded liability that Dover's on the hook for half of
The region, John, the
the
region.
I'm sorry, the region, and Dover, which Dover has a $12 million liability that's currently unfunded. So originally, and we have had this discussion now for 8 months about how free cash should be segmented, and part of our free cash should be set aside to fund that liability. That was one version. So of the 3 segments that make up our free cash discussion that we've had now for 8 months or 9 months, the school was interested, very interested in us doing that. Everybody thought it was a good idea, but we have yet to come up with exactly what the language should say. So it's those units of conversation that people agree on, but we need to get clarified. So when we hand somebody that, which I think Robin's a great idea, the talking points or the units of conversation around these articles, you have a very concise way of saying, in free cash, we're looking for these 3 things.
but John, you have to take a step back. You have to say, what is free cash?
Yeah.
What do we have? Why do we think? You know, you have to, and remember, it has to be short.
Right.
Why, you know, what is it going to do? What are the alternatives? Why is our free cash balance so much higher than other towns? And then we can talk about it. You know, so I think it's important to get this down on paper so that we can begin to look at it and refine it. You know, I think the challenge for the 3 of us is we've all agreed how important it is to begin to look at the infrastructure for technology. And we're going to be asking for money.
Yes.
And so we need to have a story, you know, why it's important, what the plan is. So all of these things, you know, you want to let people know what's going to be discussed at town meeting, and you want to give them the information so that they can begin to think about it. And I think it would be great to give them the information before the open hearing.
Yeah.
And just keep giving, right, and just keep putting the information out there. And, you know, maybe, I think we should try and do 1 or 2 or 3 open houses. You know, just a couple of hours. But if you have talking points, it's a lot easier to do.
It's extremely difficult, dare I say impossible, to take 11 months' worth of work and consolidate it the month before town meeting.
Right.
Or at town meeting,
Right.
worst case scenario. Interesting, along the same line, Robin, that you alluded to, Don had a great comment last night about, well, why are we talking about free cash when we have a $12 million liability and $9 million of free cash? You know, we have current liability and we're...
Right, and that's why, but you know, again, John, you can't be alarmist, because we all know why did the liability go up so much? Because of the new funding rules, because there's a penalty there, you're using a lower discount rate. The lower the discount rate, the higher your liability. And this is something that you're gonna fund over many years. It's not, you're not funding it tomorrow. You know, it's probably a 30-year liability, and I would say during this 30-year period, interest rates are going to go up and down. But you need a strategy, because one of the strategies may be, if interest rates go up, you try and fund it by buying insurance policies to fund it. So that's why, you know, you need this overarching framework that you're going to continue to address. It's not going to be, initially, it's going to be fund some. I completely agree, you have to fund some amount.
Yep.
But then, you know, maybe it's on an ongoing funding. But, you know, I think it's really important also to look at alternative ways to fund this using insurance to get it off your books, or a portion of it off your books. But So I think those, because you don't want to come across as an alarmist.
Right. No, and it's just this whole process began as a conversation to have a strategy, to have a mathematical formula that we can point to say our free cash should be within these guidelines.
And to build consensus.
And to build consensus, to have a reasonable, thoughtful approach over a number of months to how do we address the conversation of free cash. As we do, just as you described, Carl, in some of these other areas where some of them are procedural, some of them are not procedural, some of them are a little bit more involved in terms of conversation in town. So it's a great start. I think it's
Right, and Bob, you know, for Carol, it's important. There's a lot of confusion still, even though we've tried to explain how we got to where we are today. There's still a lot of confusion, so you have to remind people how we got to where we are today. I think it's an excellent point. You know, it may take another 2 years to get to a point, or longer, for a decision to be made. In the meantime, the boilers are getting older. Right. So,
We need to have
right,
a
but-
good contingency.
right, and again, it's not being alarmist, it's just, it's factual. This is where we stand.
Yes. So I don't want to get into the how-tos, but one of the things that we did talk about in the town moderator, how do we get the information out, was use of YouTube. And when I first came to town a zillion years ago, there was always, over TV, we used to have and someone who would talk about the different articles, and it was filmed, and it was a Q&A.
Right.
And in that way, they tried to get information out to the population using the TV, which was the mode that they did it. But now, if you want to learn about something, many people just simply go to YouTube. And if we filmed some of this stuff in the discussion format, it's out there, it's available, and people can go and get it. So
It's an excellent idea, and you're in charge of figuring out how to do it.
I'm gonna hire a famous Hollywood director.
No, you're gonna hire a high school kid who's gonna be able to do it for you.
Sure, we have money in the budget.
No, it's a great idea, so,
It's just a tool that
right.
Yeah.
you can take advantage of.
Right. So, you know, I think if you have a fact sheet
Yeah.
and a couple,
open houses.
right, just, and, you know, maybe nobody will come, but we'll see what works and what doesn't
If
work.
we can combine this with maybe a one-day event that we're
I
sponsoring.
thought having beers would help. You do it with beer.
That'll be later in the program tonight.
We can help
Thank you.
people recycle at the
Exactly.
transfer station.
Start with the recycling and then
Right.
move to the...
So I think we need, so John, I would suggest that maybe you take a stab at creating the framework for free cash.
We have to discuss it a little more.
Right.
Yeah,
Because it should
exactly.
be a joint effort.
Right, and well, that's what I'm just having John be the point person.
Because
And,
he's the free cash guy.
right, and then Bob, you could do
Notice that?
Carol.
And what are we going to say to Mrs. Hunter?
Well, I can,
It's
the
coming.
third one is the information technology, so if you like, I'll take a stab at
There's
that.
a lot.
Right.
That's great. Any other items, Carl, for the warrant or any?
So let me just ask for a clarification on number 17. You talked a little bit about the Carroll Community Center. So I had originally drafted that sort of narrow for the boilers only, and whether we should make that broader and talk about appropriate for community center extraordinary repairs. So, because it could be,
Yes.
it could be the roof that goes, it could be
Right.
something, and not to limit ourselves just to one
Right.
No,
piece of
it's meant
equipment.
as a fund, contingency fund specific to the building because of the work, the community work that we're doing and recognizing the condition of
Okay,
And
the
the fact
HVAC.
that
There are other things.
so I'll rewrite it
we may
broader.
have, we may have the ability to have a separate town meeting this year. We may not, and we still need the contingency.
But even if we did.
Right. we still-
Right,
not
right,
just, you know,
right.
still
It still
gonna
takes
involve
time, right.
The decision, whatever the decision the town makes to be.
And there may not be.
And there may not.
be.
No, please.
No.
No.
You know, the other item, it's not money related, but it could and should be worthy of discussion and getting information out there, is this Chapter 40U municipal fines. I think, I think it's important maybe to explain, or for the Board of Health maybe to put together some kind of
I will ask.
informational.
We discussed that. There was a discussion at Warrant. There's been a discussion about that at the Board of Health. There needs to be, as you described, a framework for what constitutes a first strike, second strike, what constitutes implemented, where
Oh.
would the fine, how would fines?
Well, the argument should be why.
Why?
I think you have to start with why. And then I think potentially there could be unintended consequences of having this. I really think this is something that needs to be thought about, and I would like to see the pros and cons for doing this.
Well, if you.
And how it's gonna be
if you ask someone to
implemented.
Put together just
Right.
exactly the kind of thing that we've just been
Right.
talking about.
Right,
That should be in the
Addressed.
packet.
right.
I spent a fair amount of time with the chairman of the Board of Health on this. And so the primary difference between this 40U and another state statute, which Dover has already accepted,
Okay,
which allows fines as well. The primary difference is 40U has a provision that if the fine is not paid, so if there is a fine for a violation and that fine is not paid, then it can be liened, the amount of that fine can be liened onto your property tax bill,
okay.
which is a pretty big stick. I mean, it's not something that we take lightly, but I've asked town council to provide us with some background on what's the procedure getting up to that. Does there have to be, a public hearing, so you have the right to appeal it? So town council's pulling that
Okay.
together for us.
And that's what I was alluding to. I think we need to understand, if this is something that's going to get passed, we need to provide the framework to the town for the process. Like if it's your first violation.
Shackles. Yes, yes.
Yes.
All right,
I thoroughly agree. Thank you. Thank you,
Okay.
Carl.
So,
So-
we're going to review this with Jim. And Dave, is that the plan?
Yes.
On the 21st of March,
28th of February.
the 28th of February.
The moderator will be in on the 28th of February, and then you'll vote the warrant at the following meeting, right, the March.
So just to clarify, for those that are watching at home, the moderator will be here on the 28th, which is our next meeting,
right.
and not this evening. Thank you. The next item of business this evening is the discussion of the Technology Advisory Board.
Now, what about changing weekly accounts payer?
We went right by changing weekly accounts payroll.
It takes a team to keep you on.
certainly does. Robin announced it was just, she was gonna be that close to the edge, so I don't want to push her over the edge tonight. Change in weekly payroll, accounts payable, warrant, approval procedure.
So, Mr. Chairman,
This is yours.
yeah, if I may.
Yes, you may.
So our new town accountant, Kathleen LaPlante, has pointed out that the town has not always been meeting its statutory requirements on the timing of the selectmen signing the weekly either payroll or accounts payable.
What is this? Time?
So the town can't release checks
Right.
until you've signed the warrants.
And when we get the warrants and we get the notice, is that a day ahead or 2 days or on the day or?
So, Mona, the warrants are ready, was it a day or 2 days before the board signs, has to sign them?
That's correct.
It's usually, 1 or 2 days.
Usually on Tuesday, on Thursdays.
Time frames are relatively tight.
Yes.
It's very tight, and this is not unique to Dover. This was common with many communities. So the legislature approved and the governor signed legislation a couple of years ago that will allow the selectmen to designate one of its members to sign the warrant, so that you don't have to have all 3 signatures. And in the absence of that person, you can also designate a backup person. So there's the memo from the town accountant and some other backup information in your packet about this. If you want to consider it today or consider it at a future meeting.
Would it be easiest just to authorize the chair to do it, so whoever the chair is at that time?
Or, well,
clerk, or
so I
is
have
it-
another question. Is there a way to allow for electronic
It's in
signature
there.
approval? It is?
Yes, there is, yes.
Okay, so you don't have to physically come here to sign?
Well, no, I'm not sure how it works, but it's.
Okay.
It is provided for in the-
It is allowed,
the background
yes.
material.
That's right.
Yeah.
In there's a series of Q&As that follow the accountant's memorandum, I think it's in there. Not a surprise.
It's a document, the document that looks like this is the electronic signature.
Okay,
And additionally, we may elect to designate the town administrator.
No, that, I don't think you can do that.
no,
Town manager, town administrator, or town officer?
I would think that could be an internal control issue.
We don't have you have to have charter authority to do that, and we don't have
Oh,
Dover charter authority.
Yep.
Okay.
got it. We did.
I am certainly very supportive of this because I
Well, you're in New York, Kathleen.
I know.
We know too. And you never bring us back anything.
So, it really,
You're the chair.
Yeah,
certainly-
You
right.
have the chair, and I'll be the backup, because you're away.
Okay.
I do raise the question about what the value of this is. Just as an old, study clerical operations guy, because we're signing things, big packets of things, and we really have at least very little awareness of what's in those packets.
Well, have you looked at them? They give, it's a check run,
I know what it is.
right?
There, so the efficiency portion is to certainly be number one in line with our procedural requirements, right? So speed number one.
Oh, getting it done on time.
Getting it done on time. And so we don't run afoul. Number two is to have the ability electronically to do it, so we don't
Yes, that's a
physically have
nice-
to be
that's-
here,
that's-
which is
that's a
which
nice
is
change.
a very good thing. And then, of course, it's still incumbent upon us to know what we're signing, so it's not like the authority is just being delegated and we have no responsibility, we still have
No,
no
I understand.
responsibility.
It's, but the people who actually, you have a series of reviews,
Mhm.
and I'm not sure about the third and fourth and fifth review, sort of valuable, but that's just me.
What happens in that instance, as I just described? We have the packet's got the first page behind it has the summary, and behind that are the actual invoices. So I look at the invoice, I look at the summary, and
You scan one or two.
I just look to see that they actually match up, that they're
I did that when I was
actually.
on the school committee. But
But
we
they
don't-
do.
Yes, but we don't have any actual knowledge of, this is all fun. We don't have any actual knowledge of the invoice, of what was purchased, or whether it was actually came in. So
No.
we're very removed from this process.
Well, so, I'm not sure it is our role
Right, exactly.
to look at these things. But B, one of the ways you could get really comfortable with this kind of thing is at a much higher level if on a monthly basis we got a report showing, what was appropriated, what has been spent to date, so you're keeping track. But as far as signing, I would think that there are sufficient controls within the town accountant's office. And I recognize from a control perspective, they want an independent party signing off on things. So potentially you could, especially if you wanted to go the electronic route, what you could do is use DocuSign, and you could just put the summary sheet in there, which shows you, the vendor you paid, maybe it's like for XYZ, the amount, and then gives you the total of the check run, and, then you know what you're signing. Right, right.
But that's two more steps. That's two more electronic steps.
Why? You scan it in together.
Yeah.
You scan in the summary, you scan in the front thing, you click, it gets sent to you. It says review, you click on the little review tab, you look at the thing, and then you put your initials on there and you send it back.
Can we use Jerry Clarkson's scanner?
I have no idea.
I bet we can.
But we can edit
Yeah.
that, we can edit the IT technology warrant.
Yeah.
But just a funny story. My son he's a business consultant, and he was working on this project, and everybody was all over the country. And so he worked on an app for your iPad that you could get so that the partner could be anywhere to sign off on it. And he was so excited, and he said, and the partner said, and I can use my iPad, and he said, yes, and you can use your iPad, and this is how you do it. 2 days later, in the mail, he gets a printed out copy of the approval.
Old habits.
He just laughed.
Yeah, I don't want to go into those, I got stories, but I'm not going to go into this.
Old habits.
What do we need to do here?
We need to accept, we need a motion to accept and to appoint first.
Okay, so I'll
Motion to appoint.
I'll make a motion to appoint the chair as the primary. Okay,
Let me just suggest, so there's a draft motion on your cover sheet, which you just have to fill in the blanks.
okay. Oh, I love it.
So, as provided in MGL, Chapter 41, Section 52, to authorize John
The chair.
the chair,
No, just say the chair.
the chair of the committee, as the designated member of the Board of Selectmen for the purpose of approving bills or payrolls under this section of the law, and further, that the board designate Robert Springer to act in his capacity.
Or
as-
member,
Oh, member.
or member.
You don't need names.
That's your title,
Well,
right?
so
I think you need.
Should we have names or no?
Member.
I think,
Clerk or chair or actual name.
I think in this case you should do it by names, because
Okay.
the next, if the board ever changes, the next board may want to do it differently and may
Okay,
not
all right.
be the chairs.
I'm
Okay.
not going to repeat what I said.
Okay.
To act in this capacity as a substitute in the event of the absence or other inability of the designated member to act.
Second,
All in favor?
aye.
Aye.
I think that's the first time I nominated myself for a job.
An unpaid job.
Yeah.
Thank you. Promoted. Thank you. Weekly payroll done.
Okay.
Technology Advisory Board discussion. The next item of business.
Okay, so I guess this was me.
This is you.
Oh, so you get to write two things. That's awesome.
So, over the course of several planning meetings this summer and fall, we have talked about establishing a technology advisory board to provide oversight and expertise to the town as we sort of believe we're going to embark on improving the technology infrastructure of the town. So what I've done is I've written up a draft description of the Technology Advisory Board and candidate profile, similar to what we had done for the town administrator search and the Carroll Community Center project. So I'd like you to take the time to review it. It's a draft document. If there, we'll certainly take comments and suggestions. I believe Carl would like to syndicate it with other boards and commissions. And if we kind of in general, and then we can modify the draft document based on feedback and try to get this staffed and up and running in March would be my target.
Right, so in conjunction with this, we also have a warrant article that we're going to request funding at town meeting. So do you think that somehow needs to tie into this, or not really?
I think there are several things that will tie into this whole idea of
Right.
improving the technology, and I think we should cover it from strategic point down to implementation, and how we see this happening, and the money that we think is going to be required.
So,
These the people who fit on the technology advisory board, of course, will be volunteers.
with an expertise in, right.
I love the idea, Bob, of not only the strategy, the integration, and the implementation. Because we, in warrant discussions all year long, Warren has talked about the missing portion of purchasing IT or IT purchases are the technological know-how in the staff to be able to actually take something and run with it.
It's hard with a small staff.
Very hard with a small town, small staff.
Well, small businesses run into the same thing, and there are solutions out there that. So I certainly support creating an advisory board,
So
technology
you guys will take a
advisory.
look at it.
Right, and I agree. I think we should send it out to other boards and committees.
So
We should have the IT coordinator also
Yeah,
maybe take a look at
we
it.
talked about, yes, we talked about people like Diana being an ex officio, and she should certainly take a look.
Right, and I think to include her in the process would be a great learning experience.
I had a conversation with Diana yesterday, who, by the way, is recovering and back to work from pretty bad bout with the flu over almost a 2-week period. So, yeah, we had this conversation yesterday. Bob, I brought this to her attention and explained to her that this is something that we would really like to do to really help support her initiatives, to give her a little bit more help. Be able to have
Yes, it's good to have a
that
teammate too.
intake or a deeper bench or a bench. So,
So, my story is not going to be as interesting as Robin's, but I did meet with someone today about this. It just happened that I was at an event, and I was talking about this in general, and someone said, well, you should talk to so-and-so. And I talked to so-and-so today, and we have such a wealth
Right,
of expertise and sophisticated knowledge in the town. It just blows you away.
yeah.
So I put a big anklet on his leg, and he's down in my basement.
Hand this to him today and say, welcome aboard.
well, Bob, when he's done writing the little handout, you can let him go.
And my outline.
Precisely.
Yeah. Feed him well. Thank
Hope he
you.
doesn't eat too much.
Exactly. The next item of business this evening is designate a voting member for the West Suburban Health Group Board.
I guess we messed up
addressed
last.
this
That
last
was my fault. I messed that one.
week. Yes. The selectmen are being asked to revote the motion from the January 24th, 2019 meeting regarding Dover's voting member of the West Suburban Health Group Board. It is the Board of Selectmen that designate the voting member to this board. To move or designate to
You want me to make a motion?
sure, yeah.
All right, so I'll move to designate the town administrator, a person acting in a similar capacity as Dover's voting member of the West Suburban Health Group Board.
Second.
Second. All in favor?
I like these quick ones.
I like that, and thank you, Carl, for that. We had a lively discussion last week, but apparently
We didn't quite get
we didn't quite get the motion correct.
That's what happens when you leave us to our own devices.
Wow. That was gentle.
Without
of
support.
Robin throwing me under the bus, as you can see this year.
You have so many times.
I said us,
Us.
the collective us.
She did say us.
But you pointed to you.
Yeah, I know. I know. The next item is to approve the representation letter to town auditors. Each year, the town auditor firm, Melanson Heath, requests a representation letter indicating that the town has disclosed to them any information that may be material to the audited financial statements. Robin, would you like to move this?
Well, do we want to read it?
I believe it is same. The letter and the instructions are the same.
I'm not sure, you could check through it, I looked at it.
The letter-
Okay to me.
I am told that the letter and the instructions are the same that we get, the Board of Selectmen gets year after year. Is that correct?
It is, yep.
Okay.
So while.
All right, so I move that the board approve and authorize the interim town administrator to sign the representation letter to the town auditors.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Updates, selectmen updates. Mrs. Hunter, do we have rail trail updates that you would like to share with us?
I do. First of all, I would like to thank members of the Friends of the Dover Greenway, our attorney, our interim town administrator. We pulled together a grant application to Mass Trails. It was a group effort. It came together really well. And Mr. Valente had the privilege of pressing the send button, which wasn't as easy. I mean, there were a couple of hiccups even doing that. But
Took a few tries. but we
right,
got
but
there.
but basically what we were able to do was apply for a grant for up to 80% of the design phase of the project. So the design phase is coming in at approximately $198,000, and the grant we applied for is 80%. The Friends have committed pledges for the 20%, and it's really going to be a great start to allow us to get plans to or design specs for the design of the rail trail. And we plan to also apply for a secondary vote once we're finished with our due diligence and have the design phase. So it was actually very fun and exciting, and I'm glad that the Friends brought it to our attention, and I can't thank Mr. Valente enough for coming back from vacation and pulling everything together that happened while he was away.
Quite
So,
literally, the 11th hour.
right, so thank you. He spent the first day back pulling everything together. But it was, And I really believe that this is indicative of how the town and the Friends and the citizens of Dover will continue to work together to build something that we can all benefit from. So that was
Very well said.
exciting.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Hunter. Thank you, Mr. Valenti. Well done.
Thank you.
Mr. Springer, Carroll Community.
We've really started to do the community visits. And what we've done is we've broken this effort into a couple of pieces. Originally, we talked about visiting like communities, and like being defined as similar population, similar wealth, similar town character. And so the list of those towns that we came up with include Bolton, Oxford, Foxborough, Lincoln, Sherwood, Manchester by the Sea, for the sailing enthusiasts, Stowe, Carlisle, and Barnum. And then neighboring towns. So Wellesley,
Medfield,
Medfield,
Westwood.
Needham, and that kind of thing. So we did a process, included a look at the website of each of the towns to see what they had. It included preparing a sort of a template for question and answer when you visit the towns. And we've sent the template to the town, either the person who heads up the community center or the COA senior center, or to whoever is the appropriate person in the town, ask them to fill out some of the basic information, that, town size, population, capacity, all that kind of stuff. That's going pretty well. Although I went to a neighboring town, although most people wouldn't think of it as neighboring to Dover, I went to a town called Lexington to see their community center today. And I know Ford has been, and Lauren Valensky on the team have been to several. So that's moving along pretty nicely. We are scheduled to talk with a combination of Dover moms and people from the library and other interested groups. I think it's next Wednesday at 7 o'clock. We're working, we have a date with Camille and the COA in April, and Crawford, I think it is. And we're going to look for, we really want to get out into the community on a much more frequent basis. Because I've said this a gazillion times, what we're trying to do is literally get the information that the town thinks it will need to make a decision about whether to fully renovate Carroll or the existing facility or to build a new facility. And this project is really much more about building consensus than any other kind of building. In talking to, now I'm starting to get actual information from other towns, every town who's tried to do either the senior center or the community center, it's been an arduous process.
Right.
And I think the woman who I spoke to today in Lexington talked about it being a 30-year process. So we have 10 years to go at least. But I'm hoping that if we can build consensus and get a sense from the community, not what they want. We've already asked the community a gazillion times about what they would want. But what they're willing to support with their tax dollars, we would have a better shot at maybe getting something done sooner rather than later. So it's really an interesting sort of experience. It's wonderful talking to people in the different towns. We have gotten tremendous support from everyone. I mean, I think people could not do this. It's just remarkable. So we are going to continue this. We think we'll be through with the town visits for the most part by the end of the month. And then we will go into all right, now we're going to have a mounds of information, and we're going to have to make some sense out of it. And we want to continue to engage with the residents.
Right.
Okay. I just would remind everybody that we went to painstaking detail to make sure that we got every group represented.
Right.
And we talked about this from the very first day in June, that it was not going to be a renovation project or a new construction project. It was going to be a consensus.
Building consensus.
Building consensus.
You can play on words, though.
Yeah. I like it. Thank you. Town administrator search.
So my update is, it's off the back burner. It's moving forward. I talked to Dick Kobayashi of the Collins Center, and he and I decided that the time had come to dust off the profile and the job description.
Do we have the recent?
I will send it out. And to have a meeting, his goal and my goal is at that meeting to finalize those two documents.
Very optimistic.
No, because the goal is we want to be out in the marketplace by March 1st. So, and I had asked the interim town administrator to join us for that planning meeting.
Yep.
So we were throwing around a couple of dates, and I think we have a date of Thursday at 3 p.m. So it's the 14th, but everybody will be in time for Valentine's Day dinner,
Mine.
right?
I expect roses,
There will
John.
be. It is Valentine's Day.
But I will send out to all of us where we stand, where the profile is, and where the job description is.
Great, thank you. As far as an update on the free cash, just not to reiterate things we've discussed earlier with regards to our first warrant articles, but we did discuss at warrant last night the idea of a framework of units of conversation that both the Board of Selectmen and warrant would like to hear back from the school. We thought Andrew and Don had some nice suggestions in terms of how that the wording of this article should appear. And we also talked at warrant last night how warrant is getting their arms around the dollar amounts, whether it's an amount to turn back in the form of reducing the rate like we did last year, and the other item that we have been talking about, which is a preservation fund, a set aside to have the ability to create a preservation fund and have the ability to use that set aside to potentially bond or to create a bond that we may use to purchase something that comes up in the future. So
You guys have made a lot of progress.
we've made a lot of progress, and the continuing theme that you've heard tonight at home and that we've heard over the past couple of meetings are there's a great consensus around and a great interest in these articles. The devil is in the detail, and the devil is always in the detail of the wording at town meeting. So we're going to take as much time as we possibly can to get the wording to be as precise as possible. So we both have flexibility and control over any amount of money that we set aside. Would you like to add anything to that part?
Nope. Sounds good.
Thank you. And Carl, update, next item of business.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. So 3 or 4 things to update the board on. First, I want to talk about the work Mona's been doing on your new agenda packet.
I like it.
And so let me just explain what some of our long-term goals and short-term goals are. So long-term, the board has talked a little bit about having an electronic web-based packet so that you could not only have it electronically, but anybody in town who wanted to see it could go to the web. And I had some experience doing that in my last community, and the thing they look for is that you have first a manual system in place that they can then turn into an application, and it works pretty well, my experience has been. So we're thinking sort of long-term, if you want to pursue that, of an electronic web-based agenda packet. Short-term, we'd like to do a couple of things. One is get any feedback you have on the way this is laid out, would be one. Secondly, we'd like you to consider on the agenda creating a consent agenda, within your agenda. You always, it seems like you have a couple of really housekeeping type of articles, one-day liquor licenses, approval of the minutes on today's, that if the board was open to it, we would just make that a consent article. And then when that came up, you would just move the consent article, just a single motion, move that. If there was something in it that you thought doesn't belong there, you would ask that it be removed from the consent item. So that's one thing we'd like you to think about. And then the third thing is we'd like to see if we can complete this document for you in advance of your meeting, 1 or 2 days, so that you have it in advance to review. I know sometimes you can come in and pick it up, but not always. So we're also looking at ways of getting it to you if you can't come in and pick it up. But I think we'd like to work towards having it available, the whole document available, a couple of days in advance of your meeting, because you're asked to look at a lot of data, and, you know, Ms. Hunter talked about the representation letter for the auditors. You know, it's a reasonable question to try to look at the meeting. So that's our other goal, is to see if we can change the schedule a little bit on this.
Terrific.
I think it's great. Mona, thank you.
I
very
love
much.
the consent idea, because then we can focus the meeting
On
on meeting things and not waste time, right, on the administrative items.
One-day liquor license
Yeah.
that John
That
loves to do.
Robin, making Robin read the.
I am okay making that a consent item.
It's not happening. I'm sorry. Thank you very much.
John, we will allow you to say, we consent to all of these, and as always, we have not been invited. And then you'll be good. You'll be good.
Thank you. This is great. Thank you very much.
Good, thank you. Second on my list is an update on the revision to the Newtown website. So this project started with our last website coordinator, IT director, Bill Clark. And Bill took it a certain amount of the way and then left to a different position. So it was inherited by our new website IT coordinator, Diana, just as it was. I mean, she didn't do anything with it. She wasn't part of any of the development, so she just, it was literally thrown over the fence, and she received it when she got here. A couple of weeks ago, the town clerk and myself and Mona met to go over what Bill had put together and how he had organized it. And we had a number of questions, a number of things we'd like to see a little bit differently, focus differently. So we each went back and sort of been working on that, the three of us, and we're meeting again on Monday of next week with a revised version of the website that we think, how we think it should look, at least far enough along that we can then shop it to the Board of Selectmen and to the other boards and committees and get their input. It is largely based on best practices for websites that have been developed by the Mass Municipal Association. So we're working off of those best practices. But I think we've got a pretty good plan now to start talking about publicly with not only the boards, but also our residents and getting feedback from our residents. What Diana wasn't sure about is how much of that work she could do herself to make the changes, or she'd need the consultant to do. And so we'll know in a couple of days how the division of the work is going to take place, and then how quickly we can turn around those changes.
So at one point, I can't remember, somebody had mentioned to me that the website was tied to the email transition. So do the two have to happen simultaneously, or?
Yeah, it was a good question, and I wasn't sure, so I spoke with Diana about it today, and they're unrelated to one another. The email is only a portal within our website. But
Okay.
whether it's Outlook or First Class or
Google.
Gmail or Google, whatever one we select can just become a portal on our website.
Okay, all right.
The other thing that I'm going to be talking with staff about is within the existing website to creating a town meeting webpage. And I think you've done some of that in the past. Yeah, but you've talked about having a lot of documents available, for town meeting. You talked about it tonight. And so creating a webpage that would have, every article listed, the motion for that article, if there's a presentation, because we know some of the articles have presentations, put that on the webpage. Recommendations, if the selectmen have a recommendation, the warrant committee's recommendation. People today are less supportive of having a lot of paper that they have to carry around. But if we can put it on a web page, that's an alternative for people who are just as comfortable using their tablet for information. Where you may know the answer to this, whether there's Wi-Fi in the auditorium
There is.
at the middle school, because then people can just bring their electronic devices with them
Right.
and log on. So we're looking into that. But I think there's some things that are not terribly complicated to do that hopefully will be useful as, going in the direction that the moderators committee of having more information available to the residents about town meeting articles, and as things get added, they can, documents get added, we can just put them right on the website.
A lot easier to do that.
So I love that idea, because we have used the website to put information up, and I will tell you from years going back, it was not always easy to find the information on the website. So I love the format of having a town meeting webpage. I don't know why we didn't think of this before. And with each of the warrant articles, because then it also makes it easy for citizens to find the information there that pertains to that particular
One of the things,
article.
one of the consultants that we had in this summer that we talked about having a template that when you build these sort of, what we're talking about, these units of conversations with a click here, it directs you immediately to the detailed information that can be found on the website. So when we send things out or we push information out or the COA pushes something out and they're referring to something just in a line item in a draft, if you include a link, a click here link, right, it directs you immediately to the site where this could all live. So it becomes an interactive tool that people get to use.
Never have to
on a
leave your
basis.
desk, Mona.
Newspapers.
Newspapers do it, right? Yeah. So,
So we're working on that. Hopefully we'll have something for this year's town meeting in advance. And then the last time I had on my list was the fiscal year 2020 revenue projection. So my understanding is that usually in late February, early March, a group of staff and a board member and warrant committee members come together to come up with the official revenues projections for the coming fiscal year that forms the basis of your budget. That meeting is scheduled for March 1st. I'll be meeting with staff tomorrow, actually, starting to work with the staff here to put together the background information on the revenue projections, including some historical data, so that we have that for that March 1st meeting. One piece of the revenue projections are the state aid projections. Not a huge item for Dover, but still an important piece. So as you, I think, are aware, the governor released his proposed budget 2 weeks ago, which includes the local aid recommendations. For Dover, under the governor's proposal, our state aid would increase by $47,000, or about 4.3% of our state aid. And for the Dover-Sherburne Regional School, about $105,000 or 3.9% of their state aid. So that's a good starting point. Typically, the legislature does a little bit better than the governor does. They always do better than the governor in an election year, to be quite honest with you. This is not an election year. So, we like even number years, but this is not an even number year. So I think the governor's numbers are probably good numbers to work off of. Again, the legislature may do a little better, but I don't think it would be a material difference.
As far as historic data goes, if I have a bunch of files, so if there are things that people, and anyone could send me an email, and I actually may have some of the information that.
Yeah, any of that would be helpful, because with a new town accountant, we're sort
Right.
of a new interim town
Right.
administrator, we're sort of trying to figure this all out for the first time where the data is. So yeah, it would be great if you,
I'll go through
Whatever
my
you may
files
have,
over the
yeah.
weekend and,
You mean in terms of revenue projection?
well, the one thing I've always done is sort of try and figure out what was over, what was under. And the town accountant in the blue book, like the best bit of information for me is always that recap. And I think I have it going back many, many, many years. So I'll look through my files and see what I have.
Thank you.
all right, Mr. Chairman, thank you for that time.
Thank you very much. Other business, before we go into the special licenses, I would like to address one item that comes under the other business item. We received a letter specifically addressed to the board, and it was in response to our last meeting. It was a question that we had addressed with regard to special application permit, an application for a special permit. And in that item, the board decided not to take any action. As a follow-up to that, I announced personally prior to hearing that article that I was personally a customer of the business in question. As a result of that, the board received a letter asking for a written response from town council with regard to that statement of non-conflict. So there were two parts of a conflict statement. One deals with remuneration, compensation, and ownership, of which there is none. So the board, specifically myself, does not have any conflict of any kind in regard to that matter. The question that then came to us in the form of the letter was, there's a second part to the conflict statute that has to do with appearance. So Carl and I spoke at length. We decided the most appropriate thing would be for me to contact the State Ethics Commission and get a representation from the State Ethics Commission regarding this matter, this item. What they suggested, I did speak to an attorney this week at the State Ethics Commission on behalf of the board. The attorney's name is Amy Blesser-Mead. She suggested the most comprehensive way for a board member to address any type of appearance, even though there is no actual remuneration or conflict in a matter, would be to complete a form, which I gave to each of my fellow members this evening, to complete a form as a declaration of statement to no conflict, or impropriety, or appearance of a conflict. So it is suggested that to make a specific declaration of no favoritism in a matter or appearance of favoritism we will, and certainly I will in this matter, complete this form, give it to our town clerk on behalf of the board in this matter. At that point, it has been discussed at length with the ethics attorney on call that this matter would be completely addressed and by their standards closed.
Yeah, good.
Right.
Do you feel
So
with that?
given that we're a small town and this issue is about a service that's provided to many citizens of the town, and there are other boards that may also be discussing this or have to vote on the same issue. So perhaps we should let the other boards and committees know of the same.
Mhm.
Yeah.
We
And,
talked about it, yeah.
okay, so
We had
if,
that
so if
conversation.
anybody else has a conflict, I am not a customer of this particular
Yeah, because
business.
We all use
Right.
town services. We
Right.
Go to
Right.
the cleaner or the market or whatever, so.
Yeah. So-
It's part of living in Dover.
No, both.
Well, it's
excellent
part of
points on both
serving,
parts. It's-
serving as
And
town
this is part
government,
of
right.
Serving on the board.
Because we're also citizens of the town, so,
We're essentially, as she described it to us, we are citizens in, for all intents and purposes, a elected position that's unpaid. I hate to break it to you.
I was gonna spend the money too.
But in a very small town, it's virtually impossible not to be a customer of a business that comes before you in a liquor license, victualer's license, many different types of capacities. So it is quite literally impossible to live in a small town and not do business.
It's really good to cover the base.
In a small
I
town.
think this.
So I think this is a great idea. And interestingly, Mrs. Hunter, to further your point, is we can make this declaration for all the businesses that we do business with, not just the business that's in front of us.
Okay.
So we can declare that we shop at the market, do business with Dover Auto, do business with the mobile station, buy sandwiches from the deli.
Right.
And as you read through the things that we sign, as you pointed out earlier, you'll find your landscaping company and your landscaping company are also.
Small retail base.
Yeah.
my landscape company's my husband.
So we're making a declaration that it is my suggestion to the board and to address specifically the letter that we received from the neighbors in the matter that we addressed last week. We make a declaration, we file it with the town clerk, which we will do today on behalf of the board in this matter, and that we do it for all the businesses that we are doing business with in the town.
So each of us should individually file this?
Correct.
then? Okay,
Right.
all right.
And that,
And just,
Yeah, then it's on file. It's
right,
put it back.
right, okay, all right.
We're good to go. So now we get to the most important.
now we get to the most important item, and thank you.
This could be, if we adopt a different strategy, this could be the last time we do
This
this.
could be the last.
So we'll let you read it, John, for old time's sake.
Is
Little
there-
drum roll, how are you gonna do this?
There's one.
Yes, there's only
There's
one.
only one. And it's a 50th birthday party at Elm Bank, February 9th.
It's for the youngsters.
We're not invited. Would you accept the
Exactly.
motion that we approve the one day, Elm Bank?
So,
Seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Minutes.
It's my favorite caterer,
Baker's Best.
yeah?
Baker's best, yeah.
See, that we'd have to file, we'd have to declare.
They're not a Dover, oh,
We'd have to declare. If we were invited, we'd have to declare.
and it's a good thing, we're just not popular, we don't get invited to anything.
Come on, John, it's getting late.
Let's get late. Accept the motion to approve the open session meeting from January 10th,
So moved.
as amended.
Second,
All in favor?
aye.
Neil, thank you.
Camille?
luncheon too, that's very important.
When is the luncheon?
January, June. Saturday, June 11th.
Okay.
And all the issues. It's very important, and the people are very receptive at that. And if you need.
Well-fed people are usually not, they're probably, accepting of things.
Camille, June 11th?
June 11th.
What time?
Right. I think it's 11:30, they usually have 11:30, 12 o'clock.
All right.
And for the coffee, if you want another coffee, let Janet know.
Okay?
Because she said then she would set up another one.
Okay.
If you need it.
Yeah, I'll delegate that to my friend Ford.
Okay, I think he's the one who got the letter that you probably had. Okay.
Any other items of business? A motion to adjourn at exactly 8:15. 14 minutes ahead of time.
John?
The Mickey says, wait, Bob, Mickey, we can't
Oh, it's
adjourn until
not-
Mickey says it's
I want to
8:15.
see
Oh,
Mickey.
It's past 8:15.
8:15.
Well,
So adjourned. Thank you very much. Good night, everyone. Thank you.